All right. Glad that you made it this far. This is the final video to tie this all together. The last video was arguably sort of the hardest, just getting like the clay table in a position in a place where you like the outputs and are, this is where you probably spend the majority of the time setting a workflow like this up. Um, but once you got everything dialed, you then can do this automatically. Like this just can run and just be a very automated process. And then you can make tweaks always, if you need to. I think, as we go through the next step, as you think about like setting these up, start with like a real, like when you import leads from Trigify, like as you're setting this up, only import like 100, like 50, right? A small list, even though you're going to whittle it down to an even smaller list. You don't want to start with like, this table has, 364 rows. Is actually more than that because I have another table here which I had like about 2 or 3,000 contacts, right? So like start with a small list so that you get the full sort of sequence dialed completely, and then you can add to it and then continue to scale it, right? So just always start small. The last step is here, once we get this data all good to go in Clay, we want to get it to SuperSend. But first, before we do anything in this final column, let's jump into SuperSend and just take a quick tour on what you'd want to do. So inside of SuperSend, we have campaigns. Campaigns have inside of them two main components. One, they have contacts. Contacts are always siloed to a very specific campaign. And then also inside of a campaign, we have what's called a sequence. So you know that contacts that go into a specific campaign are going to go through a very specific sequence. Now, you can always move contacts from one campaign to another, like, and we can go through that. But like, just think about, for example, as we think about bringing all of these prospects into SuperSend, likely we're going to segment them into a specific campaign because that's the goal. Like, we have one goal for this entire workflow is to engage with people that engage with a specific influencer's post on LinkedIn, right? And so as we think about in SuperSend, like right here, this is the campaign that everybody on those tables, so you have like 1,900 people in it. This is the campaign that everybody's going into. And there's a very specific sequence that these prospects are going to go through. So don't get scared. This is very simple to set up. This is, like I said, the easiest part is SuperSend. But let's get everybody in there. So the first thing we want to do is like create a new campaign, right? So I'm just making a new campaign test, right? As an example. Inside of SuperSend, we can do two types of sequences, either a simple sequence or a complex. The difference here is complex sequences allow you to do like if conditional, if then like sort of conditional logic. If you're just going for something really simple, like step 1, step 2, step 3, it's just very linear, then you can always use the simple. But in this case, we're going to use the conditional because I just want to show you like some of the power that we're going to pull from that clay table, specifically around that strong or kind of weak signal here. So we'll use a complex sequence. This will guide you through all of the steps to set up a sequence. You don't have to do this step right here, like the specific step of setting up your sequence right now. You can just leave it, click next. It's up to you, or you could build it right there if you want. The next step, we don't need to add contacts manually. We're going to do that from Clay. So we don't even care about this step. We're just going to move on. Again, set up a schedule. You can do this now. You can do this later. I'm just going to do it later, but we have sort of a canned schedule in here that exists. Last step, I'd say like most people skip over this. Like this is actually the most important step when you're setting up a campaign. You have some pretty basic some pretty basic settings visible here. Like for example, what sender profile do you want to send from? We'll go in through that in a minute, but like, if, let's say for example, you're doing a LinkedIn only campaign, well, you better have a sender profile created that has your LinkedIn account attached, right? If you can always add this later. So again, you don't have to have it created at this moment, but again, you need to think about that. Like who's this campaign going to send from? The other things that people skip is like in this all settings, there's actually a lot of different things that can happen in a campaign. You can have tracking, of email opens, clicks, and things like that on or off. I recommend off, but it's up to you. You can always assign one or multiple senders to a campaign, so you could look at those settings optionally. Again, there's different sender settings, in here, skip contacts and other campaigns. So there's just a lot of different settings in here that I think are important to at least know exist. Specifically, you can do unsubscribe links. Obviously, those are default on, but you can, however you want to do that. I actually don't use unsubscribe links. What I do is I set this to no, and in the copy of my emails, for example, I actually put like, hey, reply to this if you don't want to hear from me again, or something like that. Kind of a small hack to like juice your deliverability. So up to you. Anyway, so let's create the campaign, right? We can always edit those settings. We can always come back to those settings in our campaign settings here. You always can come back and change these at any later date. But what's important to have when we're doing this workflow, you want to have the campaign created first. Like, we're not really concerned about the sequence. We're just concerned about the physical campaign being created. No, we don't want a template, but if you do, they're there. Because when we do our integration from Clay into SuperSend, what we're going to be looking for is in this integrations tab is we're going to need this campaign ID. We're going to need this team ID. We're going to need this API key. So 3 very important pieces of data. One other thing to note here is every campaign in SuperSend, while they may have the same team ID and the same API key, because they will if they're within the same team, you'll always have a different campaign ID for every campaign in SuperSend, and you'll see how this makes sense when we start mapping this from Clay into SuperSend, right? But just understand, creating the campaign gives you access to these keys that you'll need when we do this integration. Cool. So we created the campaign, like a very base level of campaign. We didn't go into sequence or anything yet. What we're doing is we're just mapping data right now. Okay. So in this last column, it's called add to SuperSend. And I'm going to include this JSON, but this is probably the trickiest part, because this JSON or this API connection we have, you can do anything with it, meaning like we can add any amount of data we want from this Clay table and inject it as a custom variable with one API into SuperSend. And so I'm going to open this up and I'm going to walk you through it, but don't freak out. Okay. Let me back up. How did I even get here? Optionally, what Clay did is they built us a template. So you could just type in SuperSend, and to kind of get a head start, you could come in, and if you look, I've got some saved templates of my own, but what you would see is like SuperSend send contact. And this gives you sort of the bones of a start. So for example, it's going to pull the fields, some of the fields that we absolutely need. So I'm going to set this up to grab first name and last name, right? So these are all the columns in Clay that we'll need. And you'll see here, like it's going to pre-fill all of this information and give us a head start. But you'll see at the bottom, it's going to need that team ID that we just looked at in SuperSend, and then it's also going to need this campaign ID. So we'll apply this template to give us a head start. Maybe. I think it actually worked. Did it? Let's look. No, it didn't. Let me just refresh this. Let's do that. Sometimes Clay is weird. No, it didn't. Okay, we'll add enrichment one more time. SuperSend. Okay, we'll look for our add contact or send contacts, what we're looking for. First name, last name, and apply template. Oh, I'm sorry. It did work. It's over here. My bad. Okay, so you've got the bones of a template here. And you can see here in this JSON why this is not that scary is because it gave us the fundamentals that we'll need. Again, here you're going to insert that team ID, and here you're going to insert that campaign ID. So if I just go back to the campaign that we started, here's campaign ID right here. We'll pop this down into this like that. Team ID here. Pop this into here. Voila. You've got a fully function. Oh, whoops. And we need our API key right here. API key right there. Boom. Now you've got the bones. So what will happen is, let's say if I save this, I'm going to save this. So now you've got an easy way. So if I do this, if I just click this here, you see it'll queue up. And if I click on this cell, you'll get a success is true. If I come back to this campaign, you'll see here that this is that first contact in our table, and it's now here. But let me show you this. So if I open the contact, from a variable perspective, all I have is first name, last name, company name, and company URL, which matches what I had in this sort of base integration template, which is first name, last name, email, company URL, right? So these are all the base kind of data points that are there, and we've now added them here, right? So some of them looks like maybe went blank. Maybe we didn't have a LinkedIn URL for this person. In any case, oh no, sorry. Yeah, so everything's in here, yeah. But if you remember, what we want to do is we have a bunch of other data points we want to add. So for example, we want to bring in this value alignment. We want to bring this challenge area. So let me first show you what the end result is here, and then we'll work our way backwards. So if I come over into the campaign that we're actually, that this is actually built for, which is this campaign here, I'll come into campaign contacts, and you can see if I come up into this little gear icon, you can see now that this campaign actually has some custom columns, custom variables. Oops. Relevant goal, challenge area. Remember, these are the same things that are these building blocks here, right? And so when I look at an individual contact, I've got these columns. You can, it's kind of cool. You can just like click these and it will then produce that out on the front end there. But if I open one of these contacts, if I look at contact information and I scroll down, you can see how you see this relevant goal. That's one of those building blocks in Clay, and I'm bringing in the text that I generated in Clay, right? So how did I get here? How did I get this in here? Because these are the building blocks for our email. So here, if I look at my base, this is the integration we just did here. And if I open this up, I see that we just grabbed these base pieces of data. So I'm going to close this. What I want to get to is I want to add more than the base integration allows. And so I edit column. And if I look at this, what I've done is, you see after company name right here, I did comma, and then I can do custom. And I'm going to give you this whole prompt. Like it's in this table. Right? Like when I give you this Clay table, when I share this Clay table, this will already be here. And so you can see, because I did custom, open curly bracket, and then all of these pieces, now when I do this, right? So like, let me just show you this. So if I open this and change, if I grab this campaign ID, I'm going to bring it over to this here. Right? So I'm going to send this into that new campaign that we created. I want to show you the difference. So we'll save. So if I hit play here, remember, this is the sequence that we're testing, or the campaign that we're testing with. New campaign test, which I spelled campaign wrong, but whatever. Coming back. Now, remember that same contact when I open that up? Now look, these custom variables didn't exist before I did that. They weren't there, right? Now, not only are they there, but I've also brought in the text that I've generated. And so now I've got the building blocks. I can now build really, really cool personalized relevant emails and or LinkedIn messaging that'll go out to these contacts. Okay, so let me go back to here. Let me just change this back just so we have all of this set up right, I'm going to just grab this campaign ID. I'm going to come back in here and I want to just re-edit this. And there we go. Put this back. Okay. All right. So how did I get here? Made my column, grabbed the enrichment, found the SuperSend send contact, used the base integration, and then did my backslash to add columns, add column data here. At the very last step, I added the custom string here and then open curly bracket, and then I added more things to go in here. Massive tip. If structuring JSON is hard, which for most people it is, myself included, and if you get the structure even close to right, copy this, put it into ChatGPT and say, hey, will you structure this JSON? And it'll just do it for you. Super, super easy. And if you run into issues, ask me and I will edit this for you. Cool. So again, we generated all this data. We got it into SuperSend. We're now here. So once our data is in SuperSend and all of our contacts are in SuperSend, we now have the building blocks to build some emails and build a sequence. And so let's go through this sequence one by one. Again, you can do whatever criteria you want, but if you look at the sequence that I built here, I have a start node. Actually, let's do this way. Let's do this this way. I'm going to come back into campaign test. And I've got a blank sequence, and I do have one contact that has all of our variables. So no, I don't need a template. So I'm going to just build this sequence from the ground up. Okay. And I don't need this. Move that over here. I don't need that. Okay. So when contacts get added to this campaign, they're going to hit this start node. The first thing that I do, and this is just specifically for me in this campaign, is I start with an if condition. Because remember, one of the things that we did in Clay was we determined that there are some contacts that are giving us, or some prospects that are giving me a strong signal for outreach, and there are some contacts that were prospects that were giving me a weak signal for outreach. That was my if else or my left or right yes no to condition to say, okay, when they start, the first thing I want SuperSend to do is I want it to look at that if condition. So if step equals, I'll come here and I'm going to grab the contact signal strength. This is a custom variable that came in from Clay into SuperSend. So contact signal strength. And I want to do equals strong because the only two options were strong or weak, right? So when I come back, I'll go strong. If true, come down this path. If false, come down this path, right? That's how that works. So if true, maybe I want to send an email first. I mean, I do want to send an email first, not maybe. That's the whole goal. We got awesome emails. So if true, we're going to send this email. If false, we'll send like probably a pretty similar email, right? Like that. And I want to show you how this works, right? So when I come into this, I might grab the subject line. This is a subject. And I'll get the exact copy here in a second, but I just want to show you this. So like this is a subject. And so my message variables, I brought in a bunch of different things that build this email. So like, for example, like engagement topic, this is a subject about, right? Engagement topic. So like you can see down in the preview, it says this is a subject about lead re-engagement. Make sense? I'm going to delete this. I want to go grab the copy and I want to fully bake this. So I'll just connect this so I can save it. It's not going to let me save it. Okay, let me do this. Just put something here. I just need to add something, test. Okay. It doesn't let you save, like if they're broken. Email bodies required. There we go. I'm just saving, just trying to get it to save. Okay, so let me go back to my initial campaign here. sequence. Okay. I'm just going to copy this just so we don't have to write it all again. So actually I can just show you, right? So you can see how we had that first email. So my subject line I'm using is scaling whatever their engagement topic is beyond email, right? So it says scaling lead generation beyond email right here. Then it says, hey, first name, saw you engaged with, this is the LinkedIn influencers post on personalized outreach at scale, right? And if I look, this was a relevant goal variable that I built in Clay, right? So if I come back, relevant goal was right here, right? So automating lead re-engagement was one of the variables, one of the building blocks. And you can see these building blocks are different for every prospect, just depending on like what the relevance was of the post, what the topic was, what was their comment. Like it's building something related to all of those things so that when I build this email, you know, I've got those in here as like relevant goal. I've got the challenge area. I've got the value alignment. And then down here, I've got the soft prompt, right? So how this reads fully is like scaling lead gen beyond email. Saw you engage with person's post on personalized outreach at scale. All the red is what we're injecting with those variables here. Gives the value alignment, you know, and then here's that soft call to action right there, right? So Clay does my building blocks. SuperSend puts it all together in a nice formatted, structured email. So we'll stick here for a minute. It makes sense. You kind of see the if else what I did there. The difference in why I did like a strong week is because, you know, the power of SuperSend is like the multi-channel outreach aspect of it, where like if I want to automate LinkedIn outreach or at least connection requests, like it doesn't have to be the message portion, but just if I want to automate the LinkedIn connection request, you only get about 100 LinkedIn connection requests a week. And so if you're trying to connect with like 1,000 people or whatever, like you just need to make sure you're using your connection requests for the people in my case that are like the strong signal. And so if you look here, if strong equals true, I'm going to send him one email. We saw what that looked like a second ago. I'm going to wait a day. Then I'm going to do a LinkedIn connection request. So this is just my profile connecting with their profile. I could wait 2 days. I'm going to wait 2 days. I'm going to send another email. So it's like send an email. I'm in their inbox. Then it's sent a connection request. I'm in their LinkedIn. And then now I am going to send a LinkedIn message after that second email, right? I could do something cool here where maybe I don't want to send that LinkedIn message like until they're connected. So we monitor, like if you send a connection request, we'll also monitor like when that connection request is accepted. And then you could automate sending them a message like pretty close after that connection request. Like, you know, within an hour or two, it's not immediate. It's never immediate, just based on how we want human behavior to look. But you could do it that way. This one's pretty basic where we're going to just send the message, you know, a few days later. Like in this sequence, if the connection request doesn't actually happen, the message obviously won't send and the contact will just continue on. So you could go either way with this. I'll actually probably adjust this to do the wait till connected step. So yeah, I mean, pretty easy. Like I said, the SuperSend part's relatively easy. Your goals here are to create the campaign, create that connection between SuperSend and Clay, or I'm sorry, and Clay into SuperSend, and then build your email using those, your copy here, using those building blocks, right? To make sure the email makes sense, which they will, because you've done the right work in Clay. And then now, as prospects enter this campaign, right, you can see here, I've got, I don't know, something like 1,908 records here. As these contacts enter this campaign, they're getting a hyper-personalized relevant email related to like an action that they took or a signal that was generated on LinkedIn. They're now seeing a relevant email that's, you know, about them. They're seeing a LinkedIn connection request from the person that just sent an email. They're seeing a message after the connection request related to the email, related to the LinkedIn. So it's like creating this really awesome wheel of, you know, whatever their action is, that signal that they're creating, they're now getting targeted outreach from me because we know that there's a lot of relevance. So, I think like all in all, fairly complex workflow, but structurally like makes a lot of sense. Like you would be doing this type of outreach anyway. This is just like one way to automate it. And again, like we're using Trigify to monitor all of the LinkedIn activity from people that we want to follow. We're then getting those people that engage with that person's posts into Clay. Inside of Clay, we're doing all of our research and an enrichment on the person to determine things like, are they a competitor? Is the post that they engage with relevant to our business objectives and goals? Does this person fit within our ICP, like loosely yes or no? What's the outreach, potential analysis here? Like what are the building blocks of what the outreach could look like based on, are they qualified, their role, that sort of thing? Generating like the strong, weak signal. Again, you can go 1,000 different ways with this. You don't even need this part. Like this was just me because I wanted to make sure that my LinkedIn connection requests were like hyper dialed. I'm then finding the person's email. I do this last because finding emails is expensive and I want to find emails for people I don't want to reach out to. Also, side note, I actually don't even need the email if I'm doing a LinkedIn only campaign because I already get the LinkedIn URL from Trigify. So you could just be on, like if you didn't want to do the email piece, you could just move on from this. One note here is as I think about this sequence, when I come down to the message piece, it's just like sending an email. So it's like, hey, first name, I have sort of a canned message. I'm bringing in that engagement topic so you can generate variables in a LinkedIn message just like you would in an email. So again, this piece, even if you're doing email, you still need the building blocks or at least one or two, something like that to make sure your LinkedIn message is actually personalized too. So that's just a note there. Yeah. And then finally, after that step, either getting the email or not, up to you, but then just making sure you can get the data into SuperSend. This is kind of a complex part. And if you have issues, you just reach out and we can help you with this. But like once you do it once, it'll kind of make sense and you can like use this prompt, you can save it in Clay and you can kind of use it for future tables if you want. But like I said, this template will actually contain this exact connection. So you'll already have this. I'll probably make sure it doesn't have this because this won't be relevant, right? These will be your keys in SuperSend. So yeah, that rounds out our workflow. Thanks so much for watching this. And then, if you have questions, like when you use SuperSend, our team is, if you use Slack, great. Like we're in Slack with a lot of our customers, but if you're not in Slack, our team is available for stuff like this. Like we understand that to be successful with cold email, like these are the exterior elements that you need to be also, at least familiar with. And so we can help you set up not only the technical side of SuperSend, but like the technical aspect of like getting some of the things that you want to do connected to SuperSend, whether that be Trigify, whether that be Clay. And then if you have questions on Clay tables, like we're all experts on Clay tables here as well at SuperSend, so we can help you work through some of these issues if you run into them. And so, yeah, I would think of us like, we can absolutely be an extension of you, helping you get a lot of these workflows set up and happy to do it. So yeah, happy to answer questions beyond this and thank you so much. See ya.